So welcome everyone. My name's Bonnie Schroeder, and I'm the Regional Director for the Ontario Association of Social Workers, the Provincial Office, Provincial Association, and I represent the Eastern Region here locally. I was invited by Lucy. She sits on our local board to kind of talk to you about social work, the Social Work Association. So I'm a mid-career social worker. I graduated with my BSW from Laurentian in '93. I spent almost 6 years marginally employed, moving from one contract to another, and actually didn't. I did one stint with CAS, did my tour, and found myself actually gravitating to jobs actually that weren't social work specific. Worked in public health for 3 years, and I did my master's at Carleton while I was working for public health, and then joined BON after my master's. So I graduated with my master's here at Carleton in 2000, and been with BON ever since, and moved around for sure. I came to the Social Work Association after graduating from my BSW program because there wasn't a lot of talk about the association at the school. I knew I identified with the profession, but I actually do not work with other social workers in my current workplace. We do have some social workers, but I do believe I bring a very unique set of skills, knowledge, and expertise that really does support a multidisciplinary team. As you can tell, I kind of use health terms because I did most of my career I spent in the healthcare field, working in gerontology, working with seniors, and my area of expertise is actually the support for family caregivers, and that's what I do at BON. So I put a quiz in front of you, so you'll be able to get some of the answers as we move through. So what is in it for students with the Ontario Association of Social Workers? Like I said, I came to it after graduating, and I landed in Ottawa to try and find work, and I went, I also did my BSW before computers and the internet. I wrote all my papers. Imagine. And I found myself looking for places where I could belong and network, and I actually stumbled across the Ontario Association of Social Workers through some of my research, and they are very much the voice of social workers. And I attended my first OHW meeting here in Ottawa, and a social worker took me under her wing, and I still consider her my mentor, Beverly McIntosh. There are great leaders here in Ottawa, social work leaders here in Ottawa. So OHW is a voluntary, provincial, not-for-profit, bilingual association, and all its members actually have a university degree in social work at the bachelor's, master's, and doctoral level. Although at our last board meeting, we were pleased to open up the membership to approximately 50 social workers who were grandparented in to the college without a BSW, MSW, or PhD in social work before regulation came into play, and so we have opened that up to, and we're actually getting a few members from that group. It was incorporated in '64, and it has approximately 4,200 members across Ontario. To kind of contrast that, the Ontario College of Social Workers and Social Service Workers has over 12,000. So it plays a different role, and in it we actually support the governance of the OHW through 15 branches, and Carleton sits in the Eastern Branch here in the Champlain region. So the role of the professional association is very distinct and separate from the role of the professional regulatory body, which in Ontario is the Ontario College of Social Workers and Social Service Workers. I'll just call it the college from now on. And where the college is very much a regulatory body, and and as a member, myself, an RSW, a registered social worker, the primary responsibility and duty is to protect the public, which I think is very important, and regulates us as a self-regulating profession. So we require to maintain our competencies, do our professional development. It's a minimum of 40 hours per year to maintain your registration within the college and do your continuing competency. But it is about serving and protecting the public. And the mandate is of it is to regulate the profession, and so what the scope of practice and the standards of practice. If you've read them, it outlines your code of conduct and the ethical perspective that you take. And so I think the interests and concerns of the profession really are served by belonging to both. It may become an issue of finances, but I know myself, I maintain my membership in both because and I'm not a direct intervention social worker, because I do believe what I do. I want to ascribe and belong and call myself a registered social worker, and protect the public and know that I'm following that standard. But then I also want my professional association to be there for my clients and organization in my community, as well as me as a social worker. So if you do want to learn more about the regulatory body, I've got the website there, but it is a very different mandate. So the role of OHW, I mean, we as an association, I'm always fascinated to find out, some of the new stuff coming. They're always providing the critical analysis of government policies, as well as that impact on our clients and client groups and communities we serve, but also policies and practice that impact on social work practice. So, for example, and I'll get into some of these examples, a psychotherapist is coming forward as a new registered professional. In the first iteration of the Psychotherapy Act, social workers weren't included. And we're going to be denied the psychotherapy label, yet social workers, by and large, are the largest professional group to provide psychotherapy in Ontario. And there are new schools coming forward and new educational programs coming forward for psychotherapists. And so OHW advocated for a change in the legislation. An amendment was made. And they worked actually with doctors, nurses, physiotherapists, as well as occupational therapists to actually include those 5 bodies. If you're registered with your college, you can actually use the term psychotherapist. So you belong to the Ontario College of Social Workers, you can say RSW, and after your name you can say psychotherapist. And so to be able to really provide that feedback and affect change that impacts on our practice is truly amazing. They advocate for reform in programs and policies. They also talk about advocating on behalf of the profession and really trying to build the understanding of the role of social workers with the general public, the media, government, and other professionals. And you'll see some of the information that OHW publishes. And honestly, the new website was launched just over a year ago, and it really has brought social workers into the 21st century in the internet age. And if you look at the other provincial associations, I think OHW really does present a human face of social work and a profile of social worker that you can be social workers that you can be really proud of. And they also provide professional practice and employment supports, which I'll also get into, as well as some tangible benefits. So as social workers, we do like to come together and work collectively, and it is very much through our membership that we can have that collective voice to that with that dual focus, both the social advocacy and the professional advocacy that they do. OHW also helps you keep informed of current issues related to social work practice. They provide access to professional development and employment opportunities. There's also several networking groups, and you call the Provincial Association and you're looking to talk to someone, in a particular field. I find they're very responsive to help you connect to other social workers working in different fields and in different communities. They do provide advice on workplace issues, and they do provide those benefits that we can talk about. So here's a listing of kind of the membership benefits, and one that I just like to note. We talked about the profile on the website of really promoting the profession with the public and in the media. We have Social Work Week. Did you know we had a week that we celebrate ourselves in March? That's the first week in March. And every year OHW puts together a campaign about promoting social workers. And the social workers help people get back on track. That poster there, it was this year's theme. And every year they pick a different theme and build around the issues, which I think is really truly amazing to be associated with that. So let's talk about OHW in action, and I'm always amazed at the breadth and depth that social workers and the Social Work Association get involved in. We recently, it's been a long actual battle and lobby efforts made with the Canadian Revenue Agency around the regulation of social workers. Under the medical expense tax credit, social workers were excluded as authorized medical practitioners in the province of Ontario. So OHW as well as CASW have been communicating with the Canada Revenue Agency to get social workers recognized. So social workers in private practice who do a fee for service, they can now tell their clients that you've come for social work therapy, you can actually claim this as a medical expense on your income tax. So it's small in the large scheme of things, but to be recognized and allow more people to access our services, knowing that the cost can be offset, because we know that not everyone can afford social work services. It is available to people who need it. OHW also gets involved in government submissions, and so they've submitted to pre-budget consultations. They've submitted to the Ontario Senior Strategy that's coming forward. They've been involved in the amendment of the Social Work and Social Service Work Act, which is our college, that set up our college. A few years ago, it was found out that within the Act, actually, we didn't protect the title doctor with a PhD in social work. So OHW went to that and asked for the change in the Act and the legislation so that doctor could be a title that could a doctoral graduate of social work can actually use the term doctor, which means a lot, and again in a professional grouping. They've been involved in, even before legislation came into play, Bill 176, that was the whole issue around the psychotherapy that I mentioned earlier, that they advocated to ensure social workers could call themselves psychotherapists. They've been involved in the 5-year review of the Auto Insurance Act. Who would have thought that social workers would be interested in the Auto Insurance Act, but we know social workers do play a very significant role in case management and support for people who have been injured or disabled in a motor vehicle collision. Who work for insurance companies, who work in rehab, and work in other areas supporting people who have been injured. And so social workers weren't necessarily considered health practitioners and couldn't sign the forms that would allow them to access some of that other professionals would be able to sign off, like nurses and doctors and physiotherapists and occupational therapists. So again, they advocated for that change, that social workers would be deemed a health practitioner under that act. They've been very involved in the creation of the Psychotherapy Act. They've done reviews of the Long-Term Home Care Act, the Community Care Act, when the LINs were set up. All of that legislation they've been reviewing and getting support through the Government Relations Committee of OHW. I sit on that. So we monitor policy and legislative issues coming forward. And OHW was a key player and driver behind us getting regulated in Ontario. And then, like I said, I joined in '93, almost 20 years. Proud of it. That was even being talked about back in '93, and they had already been on the file on the issue for 5 years, and it took another 5 years to. So it was 10 years, almost 10 years in the making. And if you haven't checked out our YouTube videos of the face of social workers, this year's Social Work Week, they did a couple of montages of the YouTube videos. They asked social workers to send in pictures of themselves, and they did a big collage of social workers with a voiceover with 3 clients, Hope, Emily, and Audrey, and talking about the themes of hope, well-being, the signpost, balance, those issues, and it was just a real opportunity to present social workers in the social media. So go in and like it. Add it to your Facebook page. Social workers do play a significant role in healthcare, and you'll notice here I've collected a few of the role statements. So OHW puts out role statements to assist other healthcare professionals or programming to really understand the role of social work. So the social work skills and knowledge in healthcare was the most recent, and it's actually a beautiful chart that allows you as a social worker to explain the services and what differentiates yourself from a nurse, an occupational therapist, a physiotherapist. What's your scope of practice and skill set in healthcare? It's also a great assessment tool where you look at self-assessment, you look at, oh yeah, my skills are there, and you can take a look at where you need to develop your skills. Because as professional social workers, we want to be continuing our professional development. Again, they've done role statements around motor vehicle accident sector, mental health, hospital-based healthcare, community-based healthcare, as well as primary healthcare and looking at the family health teams. We're proud to say that most family health teams in Ontario have a social worker attached to it. And it's becoming part of that complement of services within family health care teams to refer to a social worker. And they're not just referring to social workers within the family health care teams for housing and welfare and custody issues. That's part of the role, but it's also getting to some of the other counseling services as well as family dynamics and other issues that is well-rounded as part of that multidisciplinary family health team, which is really exciting actually. Really opens the door for the profession. The majority of them are at an MSW level. Just mention that because it's always the challenge. They've also put out some different position papers based on, again, emerging themes in practice and policy in Ontario. So this year they put out a paper on mental health and addiction services. We're seeing a real focus and attention on enhancing and improving the mental health and addiction services. So what roles can social workers play? They've done around assessing, addressing needs of patients and families in a changing healthcare system, as well as, again, there's the primary healthcare team So they actually did a package of the goal statement as well as a position paper. So bringing it forward. And these were papers you can actually take a look at and use, hopefully, in your research and work. So we also know social workers like to come together and advocate in groups and collectives, and OHW is no different. They've been involved in Campaign 2000. They have a very strong poverty reduction and human rights agenda within their work. So the Coalition for the Physical Punishment of Children and Youth. They've also, again, come together with different alliance of professional groups and community-based therapy services, as well as the Ryerson Bridging Employment Practices program for internationally educated social work professionals. So people who have immigrated to Canada with social work credentials in their home country can go through Ryerson, and OHW is supporting them to make that bridge employment. I recently mentored a young woman who immigrated from the UK. She met a Canadian man from Ottawa online and fell in love, and had been in the UK working for the Children's Aid Society there, and immigrated to Canada to be with them. It took her 6 months to find work, but part of the holdup was getting her UK credentials. And so she was in touch with this program and helped her establish an equivalency and was able to get that documentation from the CASW. OHW also puts up some really great publications. A lot of them are related to private practitioners, but again, a real important part of our profession. So the news magazine, it's a quarterly news magazine, and it's kind of like a magazine style, but it always has a couple of journal articles, peer-reviewed articles on emerging issues and themes in the profession, as well as news and information from the professional association. They've updated the Good Therapy for Business, so helping social workers who are in private practice build the case for support and how to build their business. They've very popular guides on elder abuse, and a legal guide for social workers are available, and again, well respected amongst other professional groups. Guidelines for social workers in private practice, generating their own employment, as well as how to conduct an effective job search. That might be of interest to you guys. Graduate, I know both of them were resources I tapped into. So what are some of the tangible benefits of services with OHW? And I took a sampling. These aren't all of them, and so I need you to know there's actually a wealth of information on the OHW website. Some of these resources and publications are only available to members. Some of them are available to the general public. So membership kind of gets you even a richer access to resources. But they've branched out and have really done a great job at the employment support. So find a social worker, so people who are looking for social work services, they've worked with the website so private practitioners can market themselves and people can go and search for a social worker in their community. Social work jobs, so employers as well as job seekers can go to that website. They provide professional development opportunities and educational grants. You need to know, though, there is legislation, a program in Ontario where nurses, and any of the other people under the health, regulated professionals, so OTs, PTs, speech language dietitians, nurses, all actually get access to professional development funds from the Ontario government, up to $1,500 per year. Because we're regulated under our own act, we weren't necessarily given access to that pool of money. So for professional development, we don't get the same access to that. So OHW has worked with their liability insurance provider, and they've been providing 3 $500 grants at a random draw. So you can, as a member, you go in and register and enter your name and access up to $500 for professional development. Because a lot of the professional development isn't free, and it's always nice to be able to tap into that little bit of extra money. The OHW Job Search Initiative, I'm involved in this as a mentor. I get introduced to new grads, unemployed social workers who are looking to get back into the field of social work, and I meet with them and mentor them and coach them along in their job search and how they can find the career, the job that will put them on their career path. And so it's an important one that as a mid-career and experienced social worker, I want to be able to give back, knowing my experience with Beverly, who really did take me under her wing, introduced me to the social work profession and the Ottawa community as a new person. They also have an annual student membership award, and so they do hand out an award to one student in every one of the 12 social work schools in Ontario. And we actually right now, at our November board meeting next week, will be talking about offering free membership to students. We costed it out, and there's a motion going to be brought forward at the table where all students would be given free membership. And what does that look like? There's also a couple of virtual networking groups. I belong to the home care group, but there's social workers who participate on a listserv type networking group around family health teams, school social workers, home care, bilingual social workers. Again, there's that auto insurance, and then private practice. There's two groups, so a group with under 5 years and then a group over 5 years of experience. I should also note that locally in our branch, so this is all from the Provincial, locally in our branch, you might attest to this, there are great resources here in the local branch. We have one of the best bulletins, branch newsletters, very academic, very critical, thoughtful articles in that bulletin that get circulated to our Eastern Ontario members, which is about 460 strong. We have a very large geographical area, but we're one of the larger ones, and we actually do more with our money. We host the AGM and Gala with guest speakers, the Social Work on Aging and Gerontology Professional Networking Group locally meet on a monthly basis, the third Thursday of each month, to network and do presentations on aging and gerontology. Truly amazing. And I don't work with other social workers, so my opportunity to connect with other social workers who have similar values, thought processes, it's very important to me. So, I got it, got the quiz. So the slogan in 2012, social workers help people get back on track, true or false?
That's true.
That's very true. Social workers work with individuals and families across all social, economic, and age groups.
Yes.
Few professionals match social work for a wide variety of settings in which they work and the range of services they provide.
I think it's true.
It is true. I mean, nurses tend to go head to head with me because I work for a nursing organization, and I say, yeah, but you work in healthcare, you work in hospitals, that's where you mostly congregate. Social workers can work in hospitals, they work in detention centers, they work in the community, they work for nonprofit social services, they work in government, they work all over the place, and it truly is a breadth and more consistently across. Social workers advocate for change in social conditions that restrict access to equitable services.
True, yes.
And the social determinants of health play a crucial role in the overall health and well-being. And that's actually been a board discussion and motion, that is actually the lens within which we look at all of our social and professional advocacy advocacy, the social determinants of health really is that underpinning value base that we do. OHW does the work. Social workers assist people to resolve problems that affect their day-to-day lives.
Sure, yes.
Social workers focus on people's strengths. The role of social work is well understood and doesn't need to be promoted. I would agree with you on that, and I do think we're we don't always want to toot our own horn. We tend to be a little more humble, but the accomplishments and contributions of our profession are truly amazing. And when I find out, another person is a social worker, I gravitate towards them because you do align yourself. Like I was at the home care conference last week, and I ran into Sue Vanderbent, who's the executive director of the Ontario Home Care Association. She's a social worker. Sherry Torchman, she's vice president of the Carleton Institute for Social Policy. I've checked out that organization's work. Amazing stuff coming out of that think tank. She's a social worker. Antoinette Zolti from the Manitoba government. She's actually a consultant working within the finance and administration department. And I'm watching a presentation on a new policy that will allow family members actually to be paid to provide the care a senior or an adult with a disability requires, because in the rural and remote areas they don't have the staff. And so they've evolved their policy to look at paying family members, providing economic benefit in exchange for the services and care they provide. She gets up in front of the group and puts her front side on. Here she's a social worker, MSW, RSW, and I went, I knew I liked you, Antoinette. So it is amazing to see the kind of contribution and impact you can have in the variety of careers that you can have in social workers. It's amazing, truly amazing, and I do think we need to do a better job of tooting our own horn, even if we don't want to. We need to maybe get out of the humble pie.
Or even just, I find, what is a social worker?
Mm-hmm.
I think, unless you're a social worker, a lot of individuals don't tend to understand what the role of a social worker is, because it's so broad, right? There's so many ways that you can.
Yeah, I think so too, and I do know social workers tend to, in employment opportunities, compete with other degrees. So what does differentiate you? What puts you above? I think part of it is the education, your practicums, your learning opportunities, skills, I think values that really do put us apart. And so to be able to internalize that and present that to a potential employer or to another program, if you had a choice, would you hire a social worker, or would you hire someone who has a BA in psychology? And that's what they end up. Their education is great, but what have we been able to give someone within the social work practice? So the title social worker is protected under the provincial law in Ontario and can only be used by individuals registered with the college.
That's true.
Yes.
Yeah. So when you say you have your BSW and you have your Bachelor of Social Worker, you actually, if you're not belonging to the college, you can actually call yourself a social worker. So it is a bit of a gray zone, but hence I think being able to hold both in your professional association membership and your college membership is an important part of your professional identity and your professional practice. Can you tell I'm a little biased? And the Ontario Association of Social Workers is the voice of social workers in Ontario.
True.
Yeah.
Awesome, I think they all got 10 out of 10.
So you can even if you have a bachelor, you can still practice social work and do private practice, register with the Ontario with the college.
Yeah. We are a self-regulating profession, so when you look at your standards of practice and your scope of practice, you need to assess yourself. And the college does, and I'm not speaking on behalf of the college, this is my knowledge of it as a member, so I just add that as a little disclaimer. But they develop the continuing competency program, and every year they put out a guide. As a member, you're to fill it out and assess yourself based on the 5 standards of practice, and so it allows you to assess yourself. And so as a BSW, RSW, with your other ongoing professional development, skill development in place, you can offer counseling services. Again, it may not be as a full scope of practice as, say, someone at an MSW level with 10 years experience, but you can start creating, but it's self-regulating. You need to know where your zone is, where your comfort level, your skill set is. So it's very important to be reflective on that and do that reflective practice on an annual basis. The college expects you to do that. I know myself, I'll never put the term psychotherapist after my name at RSW. Like, that is so not in my scope of practice. I did my policy and administration at Carleton. My partner is a social worker. He works in community mental health with the crisis mental health team. He does psychotherapy. He puts MSW, RSW, psychotherapist at the end of his name. Because again, that's within his scope of practice. His professional development activities are so not my area of interest. He goes to the behavioral cognitive therapy workshops where I go to the coalition building, social policy workshops, but I'm building my skill set in my area of expertise and scope of practice that is different than his. But we ascribe to a professional identity and a professional standard of practice. And that's what's exciting about social work, is that you can do that. And when you have with your clients, and you can proudly post it behind your counseling chair that you're a member of the college, and it's your duty to tell them, I belong to this college. If you have a complaint about me, this is where you go. When as a social worker, some support around practice issues, I call the association and say, this is what's happening, am I the only one having this experience? So again, college protecting the public, association supporting the practice of the profession. Now I put a few little websites that you may not have stumbled across in your research, but the new social worker online. My partner Paul put me onto that, and we actually, when we graduated with our MSW, we got this journal, and it's a great resource for new social workers beginning in their career. The social work news actually is kind of neat because you can kind of get a feed of different social work news from the media. The Social Care Network and the Guardian. Really kind of aligns with Carleton's whole philosophical approach to the political economy. UK stuff is really great. And there's a couple of other ones. Social Work Today is a great magazine, news magazine from the National Association of Social Workers, and the Social Work Podcast. Of course, I would be remiss in not mentioning, OASW, CASW, but currently OHW is not a member, which I don't know if you knew that, but we're working on resolving the breach in that relationship, and I'm hopeful that we'll get to a place where OHW will renew its membership in the CSA. And Shiro is our student director at the Provincial Board. She's a PhD candidate at the University of Toronto. If you have any issues that you want to raise as a social work student, she is quite approachable. She talks a mile a minute. She talks faster than I do. And quite a powerhouse of a young lady. And by all means, you can give me next.
Thank you.
No problem.
Oh, I love it.
Very important.
I went to the website, but I realized how little I knew about the association. Yeah, I want to join it.
Yeah.
Um.
It does great work.
Yeah.
It can do more, and I'm an active member locally and now on the provincial board, and I'm hopeful that I found that every year we just get better and do more and offer more to our membership. It's truly amazing.
Yes, yes. And just the level of support itself is tremendous. Yeah. So the College of Social Work and Social Service Workers, are they, what type of association does the OSW have with them, or there is none?
Well, they sit as separate entities.
Yes.
One's been mandated with legislation through the college. If you want to call yourself a social worker, if you want to work in a hospital, you want to work there's a few counseling agencies and the like, you need to be registered, hence they have more members. OHW led the charge to actually get us regulated. We were actually the only jurisdiction in all of North America that was not registered. We were the last ones in '99.
Okay.
So they are separate. But they do a lot of work together, knowing that the mandate of the college is about protecting the public, and that's their primary mandate. So and OHW is about the social advocacy and professional advocacy. The conference, the college is our major sponsor.
Okay.
So they work together. We do cross-promote. At the AGM, we presented on the Psychotherapy Act. The college was there talking, because again, it was an issue of a registered social worker actually being excluded from the act, not having the doctor time protected. And so OHW was the one out there lobbying. The college can't lobby, because they're restricted in what they can do, but they, in the interest of the public and protecting the public, being able to say a qualified registered social worker, this is in their scope. So the OHW went ahead and moved that agenda forward. So they're always talking.
So there is a lot of collaboration.
Oh, very much
Yeah.
so. Very much so. Yeah. And you see how they work together in evolving the profession in Ontario, and it's different right across the country. So if you're working, you live in. Are you from Halifax? Yeah. So you go back to Nova Scotia. You belong to the Nova Scotia Association of Social Workers. Your one membership actually gets you membership in your association and your college, and there's a blurring of the boundaries there. And it's my personal opinion those two bodies should be separate, but there's not enough members there. So they tend to deliver on the minimum of protecting the public, which is a very important role that the college has to play and should play. But again, that resource to do, and again, the numbers are small. But six of our provincial associations, social work associations, are also regulatory bodies. So we have an issue across the country where we have overlap in those two roles. Because if you look at the college, it's not a whole lot there for you per se as a professional. You get your magazine, you get your standards of practice, you get your continuing competency, so that you can be registered, and if there's work involved. But beyond that, most of the other stuff is about how people can make a complaint about your practice, and really, and they did delineate between social workers and social service workers.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I was talking to somebody that does private practice, and he said that it can be fairly isolating. So, belong to the college, he says there are opportunity to network with people that he wouldn't have if that didn't exist.
Yeah, very much so. Very much so. And many private practitioners start out actually kind of making the leap, from full-time employment, starting to build their practice.
Yeah.
And so try and keep the foot in both. Some of them go and do the counseling, but for an organization, or become an associate and become, and work in groups, kind of a collective, or you hang up a shingle.
Yes.
And it can be very isolating. My partner, Thomas, being a mental health social worker, he also does counseling from our home office and private practice.
You should come in here and talk to us.
He's a graduate of Carleton, actually. We moved in together as we were starting the MSW program here.
Yes, yes.
Yes, we were the, married couple in a room.
Because for the conference, I don't know if you guys are planning to go, but there's a conference next week in Toronto, right? Yeah. And there is networking, and I went with the private practice, even though I'm a student, but I want to hear what they have to say about doing private. That's why I started social worker. But I know here, Carleton, I don't know about you guys, but it's very much geared to more social policy, which is great. And there's a lot of clinical.
Yeah. It's interesting because I do think Carleton, I'm going to be biased because I am from Carleton. I do believe
in your social policy too.
Yes. I chose the social policy stream, and I happened to, be in Ottawa at the time, and I really couldn't go do anywhere else, but it really fit mine.
Yes.
I do believe Carleton gets a bad rap that there isn't enough direct intervention, but honest to God, how can you prepare a social worker with that scope of practice as a counselor in direct practice, that psychotherapy? They are your education is supposed to prepare you to be a beginner in your field. And I know the college is Ontario College is trying to create what is kind of the minimum standard for a beginner social worker. So Carleton has actually no different courses than what I would say is at U of T or at Laurentian or at Windsor or Wilfrid Laurier around the direct practice. I would say more of their professors might be in direct intervention practice and private practice and the like, and working in more clinical settings in some respects. But if you are being prepared to be a beginner, you need that mentorship. You don't practice as a nurse or a doctor without some significant support of consolidating your skill set and become and moving along your career path as a social worker without that reflective practice, and an opportunity to say, oh yeah, no, that's beyond my scope. So as long as you know what you're offering and what your scope is, and you know that you're working within your social work framework and your scope of practice, Carleton will set you in good stead. If you go and get one or two of your placements in more clinical or direct intervention, you're well on your way to setting yourself up to be a great counselor in private practice. It took Paul 5 years, and every year though, 40 hours, that's a whole week. A work week of education. So he would go down to the U of T, the Center for Addiction and Mental Health, the INCO Institute, the Gottman Institute. He goes to these conferences and workshops, at least 2 a year. Most of them are 2 or 3 day workshops, and he builds on that skill set, and he knows when to get out and refer. Yeah, what you're presenting here is not in my scope. I don't feel comfortable with this. I think you need to go and see someone else. Let me help you. That is a professional social worker. That is what is required of you as a registered social worker. And as a beginner social worker, coming out, graduating, you're proud of your degree, you've got it on your wall, you've got your professional association membership all framed up, you've got your college registration, wallet card in, and you can flash it, But it's very important that understanding. So Carleton, I think, is trying to be able to balance it more. You still have the two streams. You have a critical lens that we use, that's different. It's different. You know, talk about race, class, gender with the Laurier graduate, and they look at you, what are you talking about? Well, wait a minute, what about the social structures that actually have created these issues within our society? Like, how do you talk about that? I work at a very traditional, very conservative organization, but I can talk about a gender analysis. You know, who do you think are the majority of the home care workers? Women. Who do you think the majority of our clients are? Women. Who do you think are the majority of the people who are caregivers supporting these older women? Women. You know, like, you can't not talk about a gender analysis. I may not actually, be a little more overt about it, but I can't not talk about any of my issues in my sector, in my area, without talking about gender. Majority of home care workers are personal support workers, economically not valued. They make, $15, $16 an hour. Majority of the women. Who do you think the majority of our home care clients are? Actually, poor women. When you think about the caregivers supporting those seniors, actually making decisions about their economic security to care, leaving the labor market, changing their work habits, all have economic impact. You can build that in. The majority of home care workers come from different cultures. They immigrated to Canada. It's a good job, but the majority of them are. So you can really build that in. So I think we put ourselves actually in better stead because we can do all of that. We can help someone at day to day, but we can also look at what's the social structures that are putting them in that place, and we have to work at both levels. I don't think many of our other professional groups will work at both levels.
And you may recall from your time as here at Carleton that we do discuss that a lot, right, in class, the inequalities, oppression, and that type of thing. One thing that tends to come up a lot in discussion is as social workers, unless you're in private practice, but as social workers, usually we are hired by an organization. You're tied up by the organization structure, right? Yeah. So if you work in government, so how do you assimilate that, idea of being more, because you're not only a worker, but you're also advocating for the profession, for the woman, for the minorities. But how do you do that because that's a lot of questions that the students have. How do you do that within an environment where there is very structured and don't rock the boat, otherwise the funding may not come, that kind of thing?
I do think it's kind of, you need to be able to work in an organization where you feel your values align. Change happens within, but change can also happen without. I belong to the Ontario Association of Social Workers because I know that they will go out and say things that I know myself as a social worker could never say in my organization. So when I was a CAS social worker, oh my God, you had families coming at you, 20% of your caseload was taking the majority of your time, and you go into supervision and, you're feeling like, oh God, and they say, okay, so so-and-so's case, the Canada family, that's my, that family that took the majority of my time. And I looked at my supervisor and I said, to be honest with you, I know what to do with this family. We're helping, stabilize, get them out of it. It might not ever happen. They're a chaotic family. I don't need supervision on this. But I worked in a caseload where all my kids on my caseload had disabilities. Talk about putting them in vulnerable positions. And I'm saying, I have 8 families on my caseload right now coming to the CAS because they need respite. Their kids are between 12 and 16 years old. Mom's hurt her back caring for a child with cerebral palsy. breaking down and they're coming to CAS and I have to label them threatening to abandon because she wants to protect her marriage and her health. What are we doing about that? He kind of looks at me, what? I got 8 families like this and I'm one of 12 social workers in this department. We never talked about that. Well, we went and started, my supervisor started talking to the Rotary Home and talking to, now they're called the In Community, and they started talking about respite services, and we actually stopped labeling them threatening to abandon. I actually brokered more relationships with the for-profit group homes who provide respite services to families because they don't know where to turn. They need the human resource. And the lawyer's going, why are they here? So you can change within, but it's often overt, it's underlying, it's raising issues in ways that may not be confrontational, but saying, hey, like, really? They shouldn't be here. Why, questioning it. I know they're still there, because there isn't respite services for, young teenagers in the Ottawa area. I know that. But how do you evolve that? So you can work in a very structured, very, CAS, work in a hospital. The hospital social workers here in Ottawa are forced to be reckoned with because they belong. They belong to the Council on Aging. They belong to the Ontario Association of Social Workers. They belong to the Council of Women. And they sit on all of these collectives outside of their job. And they're Beverly McIntosh, they're Barbara Burns, they're Mark Nelson. And, they come from the hospital and they affect change in these community groups. It becomes a lifestyle for sure. I think more so than the learning of the professional and personal lives become very rare in the social profession, more so than nurses or other professional groups. But again, that's you gravitate towards the profession for a particular reason, and not just because you're Pollyanna. Yeah.
It's true. It's true.
And that's one of the myths, I just want to help everyone. No, actually, I don't want to help everybody. I want to create a world where people don't need help. That we're able to live, our lives because our needs are met, and so. Thank you.
I find it fascinating.
Yeah.
Because right now I'm getting a lot of theory, but it's nice to hear from the practice component. I haven't done make experimentation.
Yeah. Don't get me wrong. It's hard to actually transition.
Yeah.
And soften it, and figure out how to translate that into your work life.
Yeah.
Because I know I got myself broadsided a few times. I was doing my MSW while I was working full-time in public health. I was the first social worker they ever hired, and we had a journal club. I sound like a rabble-rouser, but I'm really not. We had a journal club, and they would do these, articles on, obesity rates and smoking cessation and all of these things that are very typical of, health promotion and public health programming and stuff. And I put my name forward. I'm at the journal club next month. Gender is a social determinant of health. The evaluator went head to head with me on this round table. He goes, "That's secondary data. You haven't proved anything." And I said, "Well, no, actually, I have proved it. Majority of public health workers, women, majority of consumers of population health and health promotion programs, women. Women are guardians of health. Talk about the social determinants. Let's talk about gender." And it was kind of okay. I was talked about for weeks. That I was going to bring a gendered lens, and critical analysis into the work we do. Men don't come out to smoking cessation groups, but oh boy, they came out for car seat clinics. Loved them. They were great volunteers. They did car seat safety. So
Yeah.
it is, but you can make it, and you find where you fit. Because where are you wanting to go?
Because both of my placements have been so different, and I enjoyed both of them so much. Something direct to practice, but I'm not sure exactly what.
So how was your experience based on what Andre was saying earlier? You know, right now we're in a lot of it is in the theory aspect of it, but you folks have had a chance to have two practicals.
Yes,
now.
yeah.
So how was
they
that?
were wonderful.
Yeah.
Like you just learn so much. You learn a lot about yourself and your own views on things. But it really puts to the test, I think, the things that you learn in class. It's an excellent, for me it was at least an excellent pairing.
And you had a good supervisor?
Oh, I had wonderful supervisors. I was really, really fortunate. I had a really great experience. So.
Like most supervisors in the practicum don't step forward unless they're willing to invest in that consolidation. And I do believe Carleton has done a really good job at reaching out to the social service sector here in Ottawa to broker those relationships and say, you know, we come at it from a different perspective, help them build their skills that you need and help them understand how that theory applies and how they internalize it, how they project it, how they do it. So Carleton actually gave, in my opinion, gave much more support than Laurentian gave to me in my practicum. I probably should have been a little more selective in my BSW.
Yeah. In terms of self-development, I find that, you know, for you guys that are doing, you did your bachelor in social work as well, right? By doing it here at Carleton, you guys have a much greater head start, because I have thousands of hours of experience and I was a family support worker, but I didn't have the critical thinking that I now have. And so I think that impacted a lot in my performance. And all the organizations, I used to work in community health center, I work in daycares, but it was always very hierarchical. And, you know, and obviously I was sort of blind to it. But now if I had to go back, I would do a lot of my work very differently. So,
You gravitated towards this for a reason.
yeah.